Before we begin, thank you very much to Frankie H for joining the Patreon campaign. Thank you ever so much. You are a very generous person. I thank you for helping keep the channel going. Everything helps. I appreciate all of it. So, I said it yesterday, and I'll go ahead and announce it again for those who weren't interested in the Masterpiece video. I have decided that if the Patreon campaign hits 4 digits, that not only will I be adding cartoon reviews to the usual rotation around here, so we'll go back into retro-style cartoons. Nothing akin to TJTV, because I can't use profanities like that, and I can't use clips. But we'll figure out a format that is still funny, and we'll still be able to talk some retro cartoons here. Also, at 4 digits, we'll be bringing back Rush reviews, but we'll be doing them as YouTube shorts, as a occasional thing that I'll throw in as a bonus. Not as daily content, just little extras here and there. That's the plan, so I will leave that to you. You do with that information as you will. So, I've been wanting to do this for a little bit now, and I was originally planning on just kind of jumping all over the Transformer universe with it, but the more I thought about it and the more I looked, I'm like, we definitely need to do this more than once. I can't just do this for one generation. We gotta just go through everything I can. So, I decided to bring you the names of Transformers in other countries, because there's some Transformers who get some really cool names in other languages that you would have never heard of otherwise. So I thought it was worth showing off, just because it's fun to me to find out what these characters we know as Hotshot, Red Alert, etc., find out what other people call them around the world. Because sometimes it's interesting, and it's very interesting to find out how they view certain character designs. So we'll do this for Armada this time, and we'll bounce around. If people like this, if we want to do this again at some point, we will pick another generation and we'll do it there as well. But I decided to go with Armada because A, it's pre-movie, which means the names are not standardized around the world yet. You know, Optimus Prime is still Convoy in Japan. So, by the way, no hints, no guesses for what Optimus and Megatron are around the world. I'm pretty sure you can guess those. So we won't be covering them today. But Armada is also a series where the names were kind of funky, because not only were they trying a whole bunch of new characters and sometimes got experimental with the names, but also they were name dumping a whole bunch of G1 trademarks in order to keep them alive. So this is the first time we really saw names reassigned to brand new characters. And that leads me to wonder what everyone else started calling them. So we start where we have to start, Hotshot. I don't think I'm allowed to start with anybody else. So it's pretty easy. In Japan, we pretty much know this one. A lot of people know this one. Hot Rod. He was a new take on Hot Rod. Now, originally, there is concept art there that attached the name Bumblebee to the design, but there was never any move to officially make that the name. So, at one point, this may have been a Bumblebee in consideration, but it didn't go far enough to really pull the trigger on that one. We know him as Hotshot. Japan knows him as Hot Rod. In Korea, his name is Red Gun, which you'll note his gun is not red. In Romania, I will not try to pronounce it, but his name translates to Wise Guy. In Russia, his name translates to Scorcher, which is actually a really cool name that we don't get used. Ukraine had 2 different names, Hothead and Heat Shot, and Heat Shot is a name I'd love to hear again. My favorites are from Poland. One is Piorunus, which translates to Thunderboltus. And in Hungary, it's again one I will not attempt to pronounce, but excuse the language, YouTube. The name translates to Badass. I'm not even kidding. That's not a phrase I would ever attach to Armada Hotshot, but I guess in Hungary it's what you have to call him. See what I mean by this is kind of fun and interesting to see how different cultures, different translators interpret these characters. In Ukraine, they emphasize the part where he gets angry a lot and called him Hothead. That's perfect. Let's move on to Blur. Okay, so pretty obvious. Okay, so pretty obvious. He's a blue bot, so he's in the sleek alt mode. So he's gonna get called Blur in America. In Japan, it's Silverbolt, playing to the fact that his vehicle mode is very sharp and silver in color. Hungary stayed with Blur. In Mandarin, in China, the name translates to Daring Vanguard. That's a name. Blur in Russia as well. It's Korea that I think wins out. They named him Sunbolt, which I think is an awesome name. I would love Sunbolt as an actual name for another Transformer. I don't know where they get the sun part because he's got some orange on him, but that's about it. Don't know. How about we go to Jetfire? We'll see what he came out as. Now, in Japan, they kept the same name, so nothing really weird there. In Polish, the name translates to fighter plane. Not quite. Not quite. In Hungarian, it was plane fire. So I guess the name for plane and jet are the same there. Ignite in Mandarin. Again, we got some very fiery names in a lot of this. In Ukraine, it was lightning. In Romanian, Flamma. So everyone jumped on the fire name, obviously. But there's some interesting ones in there. I kind of like it. Now, Red Alert, No Shock was named Ratchet in Japan. They did try to reuse a lot of the original vintage names. The main ambulance guy, the main medic guy is Ratchet. Well, obviously here we took the secondary medic guy with Red Alert, who wasn't even a medic guy, really. He's a fire. He's fire response. But Red Alert works as a name for an ambulance. In Hungary, it was simplified to Alert. Portuguese and Spanish, they had and in Mandarin, the names translate to Red Alert, so nothing shocking there. In Russian, Panicker. The name was Panicker, which translates to alarmist, which is not exactly something I would consider for him. In Polish, it was Alarmus. M-U-S, Alarmus, which is, again, not a bad name. Not a bad name. In Korea, it was kept simple to Patrol, which I guess kinda. It's not a cop car, but kinda. Let's go to Scavenger. In Japan, it was Devastor, which is a play on the Japanese name for Devastator, which was Devastar. Of course, he's going to be a Constructicon homage no matter what language he is in. He goes by a few other names, some interesting ones. In Korea, he went by Hyena. Interesting. In Polish, his name translates to Gravedigger, which is actually a name attached to a completely different Constructicon I don't even think they were aware of when they named it. But the translation, the actual literal spelling of it is actually spelled Grabbers, which just makes me think of his big hands. In Russian, his name translates to Garbage Man, which I think is reflective of how a lot of people view his toy. The winner is in Hungarian, which it's Dogabo, which can be Scavenger, but the literal translation is Corpse Eater. Heroic Autobot, Corpse Eater. I don't think we're going to see that one anytime soon on American Toy. Alright, Sideswipe is another one who was a little bit weird in the naming department. In Japan, it's Stepper, which of course is the name of Jazz's Target Master repaint in Japan. I assume it's because the head sculpt does kind of harken back to Jazz a little bit, so I feel like that's where they got away with naming him Stepper. He doesn't have too many alternate names to go through, though. In Hungarian, his name translates to Dense. That fits his character pretty well. I like the Russian name, though. The Russian name is Uppercut. With those big old meat fists, yeah. Yeah, you name the character Uppercut. That makes sense. I kind of like that. All right, Smokescreen, again, didn't have too many different names here. In Japan, his name was Grap. I don't have too many sources here. In Korea, it was shortened to Smokey, which makes me think he fights wildfires, which we kind of need right now. I don't mean to make light of that. Please stay safe. The world is literally on fire right now. It's not pleasant. Yeah, and yeah, donate where you can, because it's a mess for a lot of people right now. Let's move on. I didn't want to drag the topic down. Just me doing public service for the moment. Overload. Now, again, not a whole lot of alternate names to go by. Most places he's known as Ultra Magnus. Again, trying to use those original terms. And that makes no surprise why his repaint got redone as Ultra Magnus. He does go by a different name in the Ukraine, which translates to Overheat. Which, again, is not a bad name. There's a lot of hot names in Armada, is what I'm describing. Like, even characters don't really have anything to do with fire. You know? Kind of interesting. Laserbeak, again. There's a few oddballs. There's a few oddballs in Laserbeak. So, Cyberhawk in Japan, which I think would have been fine. It would have been less confusing to have, an Autobot named Laserbeak. Though we've had one since. So I guess it's not unheard of anymore. It keeps the name in similar fashion in a lot of languages, but in Russia it was altered to Laser Break, which is again a name I kind of want. I kind of just want there's another video in the works where I just like write down the names of all of these like foreign names and come up with new characters based on those. I think would be fun. Challenge my art skills a little bit. All right, we've looked at Autobots. Let's switch over to the Decepticons and see what they went through. So Cyclonus is named Sandstorm in Japan and in Korea, which is, okay, fairly appropriate. I mean, that works as a name. It's certainly not as confusing as, like, trying to parse G1 Cyclonus with this one. But, Cyclonus helicopter, I get it. It gets simplified in Hungarian to Cyclone. So that works. In Polish, it's Cyclotron, which sounds like something Megatron would have devised to destroy the Autobots. It's just a fun name. I've heard of something called a Cyclotron. It sounds like something Cobra came up with to alter the weather. I'm sure there's something out there. There's gotta be. Demolisher also had some name switches around. So in Japan, it was Ironhide. Oh, so yeah, there's a Decepticon named Ironhide. Figure that one out. In China, it was also Demolisher, so nothing special there. In Russia, the name translated to Devastator. So this is the one they went to for the Constructicon homage. What I like is in Polish. His name was Demolitron. Again, cool. I like the name. And when he went to Energon, the name changed to Destructor, which sounds like an 80s pro wrestler. And I love the name. I kind of like it better than Demolisher, if I'm being completely honest here. I think it sounds cooler. How about Thrust? Thrust is, again, not one that has a whole lot of alternate names, but there's some weird ones. He's still Thrust in Japan, but in Korea he was Sniper, which I assume has to do with the fact that he's got these big old gun hands, and his minicon kind of works Sniper-ish. Otherwise, I'm not sure where the name comes from. I'm just spitballing here, because that's a very odd name to give a jet. It's not the oddest name. Because in Russian, the name translates to axe. I don't know what you see about him that would make you think of an axe. It's better than Hungary did, because their name translated to axle. As the thing on your car, not a jet. I don't question, I just report. Tidal Wave. All right, so we know through the poor translation of the poor dub of Transformers Armada that Tidal Wave is Shockwave in Japan. No surprise there. His name is Shock in Korea. They shortened it up. In Hungary, his original name before Energon translated into Wave Grave, which is so cool. Wave Grave. That's such an awesome name. I don't know if you'd get away with using it for a Transformer, but something needs to use the name Wave Grave. I'll be disappointed if it doesn't. In Polish, it was Wavetron, and eventually the name was changed to, I'm not going to try to pronounce Flamoyat. I don't speak Polish. But it translates to Wave Thrower, which is another cool name. It's the opposite of a flamethrower. In Russia, his name was Tide. In Ukraine, his name was Wave. So I guess they split custody on that character. Wheeljack. Now, in Japan, the name was Rampage, lifted straight from it's a G1. It's a G1 Predacon first, but it's also a Beast Wars Predacon. So I guess they were just feeling Predacon vibes about this supposed the Sideswipe repaint. Not Armada Sideswipe repaint. He literally looks like G1 Sideswipe. That's what I'm going for. This is another one that's weird and quirky with the names because he got the name Wheeljack because once upon a time Aaron Archer decided that Wheeljack was not an Autobot sounding name. So apparently he's never had his tires changed. But either way, Rampage in Japan, he kept Wheeljack in a bunch of places. In Hungary, they tried to be much more specific. Their translation to his name was literally Steering Wheel Jack, just so you don't mistake it for the wheels on the car. So I guess they just have a much more specific name for the steering wheel. I guess that would make sense. In Russian, his name was Racer. And in Ukraine, the name was Wheelman. Okay. I guess it's the name. I don't know. It's what you name your getaway driver. I guess that kind of works. Nothing really special with Sideways. It's Noise Maze in Japan. We know that. We know. Actually, no. That's the. I'm gonna hold that back. That might have gotten. I might copy pasted that from a different spot because that's obviously not. That's the Cybertron Galaxy Force name. No, it's Double Face in Japan. I know this. I know my stuff. In Hungary, it was Bypass. in case you had a blocked artery or something. But beyond that, not a whole lot switched around on his name. This one kind of surprised me. I totally forgot about this one. So in Japan, Nemesis Prime was called Scourge. So they kept the G1 name alive, but also they straight up lifted the name that America called Black Convoy just a year before, which is kind of I don't think a coincidence. It's just kind of a funny reusage is all. That's all I really got for that one. I think that's funny enough that they stole the name Hasbro put onto the Black Convoy. But with that, we can move into minicons. Now, to be fair, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on minicons because, one, there's way too many of them. And two, frankly, most of the time, their names in other languages were kept very simple. They're typically one-syllable words in Japan. But there's a few we need to go through because they're some of the more infamous ones. Sparkplug was known as Prime in Japan. In Hungary, it was just Spark. And in Polish, Leaderus. Okay, so again, we liked adding that us to the end. I guess Optimus did that to us. His counterpart on the Decepticon side, Leader 1, was Barrel in Japan, also in Korea. And it was mostly just variations on Leader 1 in other countries. But my favorite is being, in Ukraine, it is Leader Odin, which still translates to Leader 1. But I love the idea that this minicon is named after a Norse god. I think that's hilarious in a weird way. Because it's me, I had to check in on the Star Saber and see what they called it in other languages. In French, it's the Épée Céleste, the Celestial Sword, which I like that a lot. A lot of times just translates to Star Sword. In Hungarian, it translates to Blade's Edge. What was my favorite one? Where is it? I'm trying to look for it. In Italian, it was Spada Stellar, Stellar Sword, which I really like. And it's mostly variations of that. Star Sword, Star Saber, Stellar Sword. You know, they mostly had the same idea going for this one. Let's check in on the street action minicons before we wrap this up. In Russia, it was just simply wire instead of high wire. Kind of simplified there. Hungary did the same thing. In Korean and Japanese, Wheelie. Another G1 name. And actually it makes far more sense to call the actual mountain bike Wheelie rather than the car. Partner Grindor in Japan and Korea was named Bank. No, it's not named after a financial institution. No, it's not where you keep your money, and it's not the side of a river. No, it's literally like a skate ramp. That kind of bank. Like an angle. Nothing really weird about that. In Hungarian, they actually kept the name Grindor. The more correctly spelled Grinder. Yeah, I guess someone else liked the name. I never liked the name Grindor. I mean, I guess it makes more sense for a skateboard than it does, helicopter later on. Sure Shock was always the fun one. Sure Shock is another one in Armada who got misnamed all the time. In Japan and in Korea, RC. So this actually got the again another G1 named up. In Russia, it was Shocker. So I don't know why I don't know why. It's either a Spider-Man villain or the main villain of the original Kamen Rider. Whichever way, they named this one, this adorable little bean of a machine, they named after Evil. I don't know why. In Hungary, they actually went through a few names between multiple dubs. From what I saw, there's actually 2 dubs of Energon. So the name ended up being translated to Shocked, Shocker, again, and in Energon eventually named Windcharger. Which, charging the wind is not something I normally associate with a moped. And we'll wrap it off with their combined form Perceptor, which is again a weird name here, but there's actually like an intention behind the name. The same designer worked on the original G1 Perceptor, so the name was in homage to him. So that was the kind of why they got the name. Also, trademark issues, all that. There's 3 names here we need to go over, which is in Japan, the name was Bumble. So this is where they ended up with the Bumblebee name. Though weirdly enough, in Super Link, the retooled versions, well, not retooled, but like the upgraded versions, Cliff Jumper. Irony. In Korea, the name was Pigeon. I'm not kidding. Pigeon. They named this one Pigeon. The bird. And in French, probably my favorite one of all of this, Perpetrator. Perpetrator. like he's on trial for theft or something. So that's your rundown. Again, I could have gone through all the minicons, but again, minicons had pretty simple names. This is just to give you one idea of just how different the names can be when you cross different oceans and cross a few borders. It's fascinating to me how different countries and different people in charge of these translations look and view these characters and what they think would be a cool marketable name for them. And sometimes you find some really cool sounding ones, and sometimes you find some really weird ones. But that's the story for Armada. If you liked this little rundown, we can do this again with other series. Let me know in the comments if you want to see it again. And I will see you next time.
I'm like, I think you guys got this. I will back away, and I will see you all later.
You've got this handled.
Alafi's like, really? You're not gonna help me? Like, it's fine now.
It's like these disgusting creatures breathing down my neck, and you're all just like, I believe in you. You got this.
All right, you seem to have this. 5 minutes.